and welcome to the news.
I'm anchor Aubrynn Wiseman.
I'm Bethany Walley.
I'm Ashton Allen.
And I'm Jackie Hill.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the news. We're here and we're going to talk about the political news stories that have happened throughout the years of the 1980s.
First up, we have the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Occurred in Prince William Sound, Alaska, and on Easter Sunday, March 24th, 1989, was when an oil tanker bound for California struck a reef and flipped over and spilled 11 to 38 million gallons of oil. Over the next few days, this caused devastating environmental disasters and took many years to clean up the aftermath of this oil.
Next we have Cable News Network, which CNN, which was launched at 5 o'clock on April 1st, 1980. It was introduced by Ted Turner, and since its debut, CNN has expanded its reach to a number of cable and satellite television providers, several websites, and specialized closed-circuit channels.
Next, in 1981, was when the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. President Ronald Reagan had just given a speech and left the Hilton Hotel when John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Reagan. The last bullet ricocheted off the president's limo and into Reagan's chest. He was quickly turned to the hospital and made a full recovery.
Next, we have the first woman appointed in the Supreme Court. In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed as the first woman to serve in the Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan in 1981. She served until 2006.
The Berlin Wall falls in 1989. The flow of people from communist East Berlin to democratic West had finally come to an end when the wall came down on November 9, 1889.
Next, we have the U.S. shoots down the Iranian airliner in 1988. July 3rd, 1988, Iranian commercial flights 655 was shot down by the USS Vincent.
The West German pilots landed in 1987. This was when an amateur pilot from West Germany flew more than 400 miles of Russian airspace to land in Russia's Red Square. This caused a huge embarrassment for Russia, and immediately the amateur pilot Rust was arrested for violation of Russia's airspace. He was deemed guilty and served 18 months in prison.
And next we have the Iran-Contra scandal unfolds in 1987. The Iran-Contra affair was the Reagan administration supplying weapons to Iran in an effort to secure the release of hostages held in Lebanon by some terrorists who were loyal only to the Iran's leader.
Bombs Libya in 1986. This was out of revenge for Libya bombing Berlin, which was an American ally. Several assassination attempts were on U.S. officials and other terrorists. The bombing was a series of airstrikes carried out by the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. There was a total of 40 reported Liberian deaths.
And next we have the Iran-Iraq War begins in 1980. It began on September 22nd, 1980, when Iraq invaded Iran's land and airspace. However, Iraq claimed that Iran had been attacking Iraqi towns since September 4th. The Iraqi president, Saddam Hussein, claimed his attack was a territorial dispute over a waterway.
Welcome back. And our 10 social news stories of the decade are, first off, we have the royal wedding. The royal wedding was held on July 29th, 1981, between Diana and Prince Charles. A crowd of 600,000 people lined the streets as they came through. It was held at Paul's Cathedral with a congregation of 3,500. There is a TV audience of around 750 million, making it the most popular program ever broadcasted. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Robert Runcie, did the ceremony. It was a beautiful ceremony and everyone was extremely excited.
And next, Sally Ride is the first American woman to enter space. On June 18th, 1983, she went to space, and her job was to work the robotic arm, which helped put satellites into space.
In 1978, DNA was first used to convict criminals. In 1978, Professor Alk Jeffries of the University of Leicester discovered that each person carries this unique genetic fingerprint inside of their DNA. This discovery made incriminating criminals much easier. In 1938 and 1986, DNA obtained from crime scenes were used to prove that a certain suspect had actually committed the crime. And since then, this new discovery has helped many police officers and officers of the law convict thousands of criminals.
On January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger explodes. 73 seconds after it lifted off, the Space Shuttle exploded. And there were 7 astronauts inside, and they all tragically died, but one of them was a teacher, and her name was Krista McAuliffe, and she was a teacher from New Hampshire who had been selected to join the mission, and she was going to teach lessons from space to school children around the country. Later, it was determined that the 2 rubber O-rings, which had been designed to separate the sections of the rocket booster, had failed due to cold temperatures that morning. When the space shuttle exploded, it received extensive media coverage, and NASA temporarily suspended all shuttle missions.
In 1986, Halley's Comet passed. This comet is only seen every 75 to 76 years. It's the only short period comet that can actually be seen by the naked eye. It will next appear in 2016 and has been seen, or well recorded to be seen, since 240 BC. This appearance of the comet was the first time that a comet has been observed and studied by a spacecraft.
In 1985, the wreck of the Titanic is found. It is located about 370 miles south-southeast of the coast of Newfoundland. The wreck is now in 2 big pieces, and they're about a third of a mile apart. And one is the bow of the ship, and it's still pretty recognizable. But then the stern is completely ruined due to the force that it crashed onto the bottom of the ocean. And then around the ship, there was a debris field covering about 5 by 3 miles, and it contained hundreds of thousands of items from the passengers on board.
On November 13, 1982, the Vietnam Memorial was opened. Thousands of vets marched to the site when it was dedicated to the people that they had lost in this tragic war. It is a simple V-shaped with a granite wall and has all the names of the 57,939 soldiers that were lost in the war. These names are arranged in order of death instead of rank. This is the first time that this has ever happened and is very exciting.
And on December 8th, 1980, John Lennon, a member of the Beatles, is shot and killed. He was shot by Mark David Chapman in the archway of Dakota, New York City. He was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. He was 40 years old, and then on December 10th, he was cremated.
On January 20th, 1981, Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president. He was the 40th president, and his VP was George H.W. Bush. As Reagan was giving his address, the 52 Americans that were held in Iran for the previous 44 days were released.
On April 26, 1986, a nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded. It released hundreds of times the radiation of the nuclear bombs that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 31 people died on the scene, and thousands more were expected to die from the long-term effects of radiation. This dramatically changed the world's opinion about using nuclear power.
Thingamabob, gobbledygook, what's its face? Whatchamacallit, whatever it is, whatever it was. Chocolatey chocolate, whatchamacallit. How's it go? Wowzam-doo, chew-gooey caramel. Whatchamacallit. Doohickeys, you know what I mean. Peanutty crispies. Chewy, chocolatey, crunchy, Doodad, let's get a Marie. More than a mouthful, it's whatchamacallit. Whatchamacallit.
Hello and welcome back to the news. And wow, am I hungry after watching that commercial.
Me too.
All right, let's get back into our natural disasters of the 1980s.
In 1980, the eruption of the volcano Mount St. Helens was on news headlines everywhere. Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18, 1980. The volcano was located in southwestern Washington and stood at a height of 9,600 feet above sea level. The eruption left a horseshoe-shaped crater with a barren wasteland, and ashes from the eruption could be seen all over the U.S.
Wow. Following later in that year, we had Hurricane Allen happening 1980. Hurricane Allen is the second most severe Atlantic hurricane in our modern records. It was rare and extremely powerful Cape Verde type hurricane which struck the Caribbean, eastern and northern parts of Mexico and southern Texas. It is the first and the strongest hurricane of the 1980s.
In 1985 was the United States and Canadian tornado outbreak. This was a major tornado outbreak that occurred in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Ontario on May 31st, 1985. 44 tornadoes were counted, including 13 in Ontario.
Next we have the Edmonton tornado in 1987, also known as Black Friday. It was a powerful and devastating tornado that ripped through the eastern part of Canada, and on the afternoon of Friday, July 31st, 1987, the tornado remained on the ground for an hour, cutting a swath of destruction for about 40 kilometers.
In 1980 was Hurricane Gilbert. Hurricane Gilbert struck Jamaica during the afternoon of September 12, 1988. It left a tremendous path of destruction. Damages reached over $4 billion, including flattened crops, destroyed roads, and demolished houses.
Next we have the Kalamazoo tornado, which happened in 1980. This tornado was rated an F3 on the Fujita scale, which measures the severity of the storm. The tornado had killed 5 people and injured 79. Damage was estimated at about $50 million.
Also in that year was Hurricane Hugo. Hurricane Hugo was the strongest hurricane in South Carolina's history. Hugo's destruction wasn't limited to just South Carolina. Hugo also devastated the Caribbean islands of Galapagos, St. Croix, and Puerto Rico. And even 7 hours after its final landfall, it still produced hurricane-force winds across the western Piedmont and foothills of North Carolina. In all, Hugo was responsible for at least 86 fatalities and caused $10 billion in damages.
Next we have the Loma Prieta earthquake. And this was a major earthquake that struck the San Francisco Bay area of California on October 17, 1989. It was caused by a slip on the San Andreas fault, the fault line, and the quake lasted about 10 to 15 seconds and measured a 6.9 on the Richter scale. The quake killed 63 people throughout northern California and injured about 3,757 people and left some 3,000 people to about 12,000 people homeless.
In 1981, the typhoon Irma caused major destruction in the Philippines. It started as a cyclone, but then made its way down to wetter areas where it formed a typhoon. A total of 482,678 persons were directly affected by this typhoon. Irma destroyed and damaged 119,233 dwellings, which left nearly 40,000 people homeless.
Next, we have the 1980 United States heat wave. It was a period of intense heat and drought that wreaked havoc on much of the Midwestern United States and Southern Plains. Throughout the summer of 1980, this was going on, and it was amongst the most devastating natural disasters in terms of deaths and destructions in the United States history, claiming at least 1,700 lives, and because of the mass drought, agricultural damage reached about $20.3 billion.
Sinkable, unthinkable.
The unthinkable taste of Cheerios. Cheerios. Now the line of sugar to way down low. Cheerios. Look how they float, no keeping them down. So this can't, that can't, no you can't sing. The unthinkable taste of Cheerios. Now the line of sugar to way down low. Cheerios. The unthinkable taste of Cheerios.
And in our next segment, we have 10 entertainment stories. Our first one happened on June 25th, 1984, when Prince released the song Purple Rain. It reached number 2 in the US for 2 weeks. It is widely considered one of Prince's signature songs. It has been certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America, and it shipped 1 million units in the United States.
Next, we have Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. This aired September 6, 1983. Girls Just Wanna Have Fun was the first major single released by Looper as a solo artist and the lead-off single from her debut, She's So Unusual.
And on October 6, 1981, the iconic song Don't Stop Believing made its debut. It was released as a single from its 7th studio album, Escape. It became a number 9 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Mike DeGang of AllMusic has described Don't Stop Believing as a perfect rock song and an anthem featuring one of the best opening keyboard riffs in rock. It is one of the top-selling catalog tracks in digital history.
Next, we have Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This aired June 11, 1986. This movie is a 1986 American comedy film written, produced, and directed by John Hughes. The film follows high school senior Ferris Bueller, who skips school and spends the day in downtown Chicago, along with his girlfriend Sloane Peterson and his best friend Cameron Fry. He creatively avoids his school's dean of student Edward Rooney and resentful sister Jeannie and his parents. During the film, Bueller regularly breaks the fourth wall by speaking directly to the camera to explain to the audience his thoughts and techniques.
And next, The Empire Strikes Back came out on May 21st, 1980. The Empire Strikes Back is a 1980 American epic space film soap opera. The film is set 3 years after Star Wars. The Galactic Empire, under the leadership of Darth Vader, and the Emperor is in pursuit of Luke Skywalker and the rest of the Rebel Alliance. Luke studies the Force under Jedi Master Yoda, while Vader tries to capture Luke and his friends.
Next, we have E.T. This released June 11, 1982. E.T. the Extraterrestrial is a 1982 American epic science fiction family film co-produced and directed by Steven Spielberg. It tells the story of Elliot Thomas, a lonely boy who befriends an extraterrestrial dubbed E.T., who is stranded on Earth. He has a sibling, and it helps him return to home while attempting to keep it hidden from his mother and from the government.
And the iconic film, The Breakfast Club, came out on February 15th, 1985. The Breakfast Club is a 1985 American coming-of-age comedy film written, produced, and directed by John Hughes. The storyline follows 5 teenagers who the actors will later become known as the Brat Pack, and each member is of a different high school clique. They all spend a Saturday in detention together, and they come to realize that they are more than what they think they are. And they also face a strict principal who they keep running away from.
Next, we have Full House. This aired September 22nd, 1987. Full House is an American sitcom created by Jeff Franklin for ABC. The show chronicles a widowed father, Danny Taylor, who enlists his best friend and brother-in-law to help him raise his 3 daughters.
On September 8th, 1986, the world-renowned Oprah Winfrey Show airs for the first time. The Oprah Winfrey Show, which is also known as Oprah, is an American tabloid talk show that aired nationally for 25 seasons. It is produced and hosted by Oprah Winfrey, and it remains the highest-rated talking show in American history. It has been highly influential, and many of its topics have penetrated into the American pop culture consciousness. Winfrey uses the show as an educational platform and also a way to give people things.
Last but not least, we have The Cosby Show. This aired September 20th, 1984. The Cosby Show is an American television sitcom starring Bill Cosby, which aired for 8 straight seasons on NBC from September 20th, 1984 until April 20th, 1992. The show focuses on the African-American Huxtable family. The show was TV's biggest hit in the 1980s and almost single-handedly received the sitcom genre in NBC's ratings fortunes. Entertainment Weekly stated that The Cosby Show helped to make possible a larger variety of shows with predominantly African-American cast, from The Living in Color to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Our next segment is technological advances. In 1983, Carrie Mullis developed DNA profiling. It was first used in 1985, and it would be used in parental testing, criminal investigation, and immigration disputes.
Also in the 1980s, came out with the compact disc, or also known as the CD. These are digital optical discs used to store data and sounds. These were soon patented by Sony and Philips and became a huge technology advancement.
In 1982, Sony released the Betacam system. Sony then released the first consumer camcorder in 1983. That same year, JVC released the first VHS-C camcorder, and then Sony introduced its compact video 8 format in 1985. Full-size Super VHS camcorders were released in 1987, providing an inexpensive way to collect a news segment and other videographies.
And in 1984, the answering machine was invented. This became more widely used in the U.S. and soon became affordable for every family to have. Sales soon reached $1 million per unit each year in the U.S., becoming a hit and a common household item.
In 1989, the World Wide Web was invented by English scientist Tim Berners-Lee. The World Wide Web is an information space where documents and other web resources are identified by URLs.
In 1986, the disposable camera was invented. This camera introduced new features to photography, such as waterproofing and flash. This new technological feature soon became a staple for every photographer to have.
In 1982, Regis McKenna was brought in to shape the marketing and launch the Macintosh. The company announced the Macintosh 128K in October 1983. It was followed by an 18-page brochure that was included in various magazines in December. The Macintosh was introduced by a 1.5 million television commercial called 1984. 2 days after 1984 aired, the Macintosh went on sale and came bundled with 2 applications, Mac Write and Mac Paint. By April 1984, the company sold 50,000 Macintoshes.
In the 1980s, the United States also introduced cable-oriented live television programming, or also known as cable TV. This offered specialty channels, such as TV shows and movies for all American families to enjoy.
Next, the Space Shuttle was created in 1981. The Space Shuttle was a partially reusable human spaceflight vehicle capable of reaching low Earth orbit, commissioned and operated by the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. The first 4 orbital test flights occurred in 1981, leading to operational flights beginning in 1982, all launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
In the 1980s, a famous arcade game came out, the Nintendo Entertainment System. This was popular for playing video games and soon became a great hit amongst kids.
Excuse me, I ordered fish.
That is fish. I think.
Why order fish when it ends up looking like a burger?
Hey, Fred, is this fish?
Introducing new seafood salad from Taco Bell. Fresh vegetables, tender bay shrimp, and a delicious blend of whitefish and snow crab. A refreshing change from anything on a bun.
If it's square, it's fish. If it's round, it's a burger.
New seafood salad from Taco Bell. The cure for the common meal.
Welcome back. Well, we ran out of stories, but not time, so here's some miscellaneous stuff. First of all, Pac-Man. Pac-Man is an arcade game that was released in Japan on May 22nd in 1980. It's an icon of a game. I mean, everyone was playing it in the 80s, and they're still playing it now.
Also in the 1980s was the United States Olympic boycott. This happened when 65 nations refused to compete in the Olympic Games in Moscow. Quite an uproar.
I agree. Also in the 80s, MTV. MTV is an American-based cable and satellite television channel, which is headquarters in New York City, New York. It was launched on August 1st, 1981, and its original purpose was to be a channel that just played music, but now it does much more.
Also, on October 1st, 1982, Disney opens up Epcot, which is the second of 4 theme parks built at Walt Disney in Orlando, Florida. This was a massive hit and major success. This park was used to dedicate and celebrate human achievement and culture, and approximately 11.5 million guests were at Epcot in the 80s.
I love going there.
Me too.
On October 25th, 1983, Microsoft Word was released. It is a word processor developed by Microsoft. Subsequent versions were later written and are now available, and I don't know about you, but I use it all the time.
Besides MTV, there is also the MTV VMAs, or Video Music Awards, which came out in 1981. These awards were used and presented by the channel MTV. They are now coveted awards used to celebrate the best music videos.
Nice. In 1989, The Simpsons was aired. This is an American animated sitcom created by Matt Groening for the Fox Broadcasting Company. It became the network's first series to land in the top 30 ratings in a season.
Also, in 1980, the Iraq-Iran War ends. This was a war that had started in the 1980s and lasted until September of August 1988.
Also in the 80s, the Game Boy was released. This is a handheld video game device developed and manufactured by Nintendo. It was released in Japan on April 21st, 1989, and it was the first handheld console.
And last but not least, we have Footloose, the 1984 film. This was not only a huge hit, but also an iconic movie of the 80s. When Ren McCormick, a teenager, moves to a small town in which there is no dancing or music allowed, this iconic film is marked as one of the greatest 80s movies.
And again, this is the news.
The news!